So, remember a day. How did you get involved?
Darryl Reed, who I'd never met before in my life, rang me up and just babbled endlessly in my ear, telling me that I was doing it for the good of mankind and that I had to come and be in this film that was kind of celebrating the life of this guy who'd gone over the top, taken too much acid and fallen into a void of his own making. He just kept going on and on and on, and finally persuaded me to go over there to Dave Goodman's house. He just talked me into it. It's something I don't do, but I did it.
And you played 2 roles in the film.
Well, in a sense, I didn't think I'd have to go back for a second time. The first time I went over, I was playing myself as I was maybe 25 years ago. I once went to interview Syd Barrett in the days when he'd really gone over the top. He'd left the Floyd, or shall we say the Floyd had left him behind. And I was working for Harper's and Queen magazine, and in the days when there was such a thing as an underground editor, and they wanted me to find out what had happened to the sort of lost god of psychedelic music. And I turned up there, and Darryl asked me to reenact the scene that went on back in around about 1971, I think it was. Might have been 70. And that's what we attempted to do the first time. Then about a couple of weeks later, he asked me to come back and to be Roger Bannerman's PR girl. So although I was the same person in the film, I myself was trying to act out 2 different roles. I then became Lady Jane Mandel. They asked me to come up with this name, and I'd written a book with Johnny Byrne, who I wrote Groupie with, and I couldn't think of a name, so I just took a character from the book called Lady Rosie Mandel and became her sister.
So you're not an actress?
No, I'm not an actress. No, I have been in something actually. I was in Season of the Witch with Julie Driscoll. I just forgot that in my CV.
So, were you confident taking on these roles, that you'd be able to do it, not having had any formal training as an actress?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, if they ask you to do it, you just do it, don't you? And if they don't like it, well, they don't like it. I wasn't being paid, was I? It wasn't my career.
So one of the roles then really was yourself.
Myself then?
Then, yes. Then being what sort of period are we talking about, 1970 or so?
Yes, 1970. This is, you know, when the 60s came to an end, there were a lot of casualties. For example, Syd Barrett was a casualty of acid. A lot of people died, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, a lot of people. And Syd Barrett didn't die, but kind of he did in a way.
And the PR character?
Well, I just didn't, I mean, there were these kind of upper class girls who liked to hang around rock stars and just freak out, drop out aristos. There were a lot of them, and maybe Lady Jane had to work, or maybe she thought it was cool to have a job.
So the name you conjured up as being the sister of, or from being the sister of somebody you actually had as a character in one of your books. But what about the personality of that character?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that's me. I'm like that now, aren't I?
That's you.
Yes,
So
aren't I like me?
I don't know. Was it a composite?
Yes, what?
Was it a composite character, or?
No.
Yeah.
No, it was just what came out of my mouth.
What is your impression now, we're speaking here in 2002, what's your impression of the 60s, the late 60s, as you look back on it now as perhaps a more mature adult, dare I say?
Well, it was great, and I wouldn't have been without it for the world. People like Syd Barrett don't really want to remember it, do they? They kind of shut the door on it, and you can't blame them. But for me, I think it was very valuable. I explored areas of consciousness I'd have never gone to in a normal life. I had been previously married with 2 children and ran away.
The film itself is, I would say, a psychological drama. Do you have any sympathy for the 2 leading characters?
Well, obviously, Roger Bannerman, yes, I would understand very much what happened to a lot of people then, because it was a very idealistic world. the psychedelic rock and roll, we were trying to say something. We tried to be self-financing. You put on a benefit for International Times, Hoppy was busted, people would try and pay for the whole thing to be self-contained. Obviously it wasn't going to work, but for a short while it was a contained unit of idealism, and therefore it was a very valuable time, and you explored areas within yourself that you wouldn't have done if you carried on in a 50s mode.
Did you recognise the character that kidnaps Roger? Is that the sort of character that you were familiar with at the time?
No.
Is that, do you think, something
that's a sort of character that seems to have come out in more recent times.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I feel that those kind of I mean, there may have been stalkers, but the word wasn't around, was it?
No. What do you think it is about modern day living that has brought these sort of people out of the woodwork, so to speak? Because they're much more prevalent now, as you say, almost unheard of then, and relatively common now.
It's a kind of identity thing, isn't it? It's a transference of identity that people have. We're all questing after ourselves. It's I think they call it that corny old thing, the me generation. There's a dissatisfaction with one's lot all the time now.
The film, I put this point to Nigel earlier on. The film is somewhat enigmatic at the end. Did you feel satisfied with the ending?
I felt very satisfied with the ending. I thought it was very good, because you're not sure who he is, and he passes himself, doesn't he? No, it's a good ending.
Yeah. Did you find it easy or difficult to take up? I thought it was quite a demanding role in this film.
Well, I don't know. Yes, okay, it was difficult, but I had a smoke the first time. Probably had a smoke the second time.
Yeah.
I can't remember. No, it actually rather reminded me of when Groupie was published in the late 60s. I had to do an absolute welter of interviews and people cross-examining me. It's not a pleasant thing to do an interview. I'm not particularly enjoying this, in all honesty, but you do it, you know.
You came across, I thought, very naturalistic in the film.
Well, you try to be, don't you? What's the well, we didn't really have lines. We were told, we were given a direction and then told just to go. I mean, I didn't know where I was going, but I went. Yeah. But then that's like the 60s, wasn't it?
Well, I was coming to that. How much preparation was there? How much script was there? How much was it improvised?
Well, when the first one, I actually said that all I could think of was that particular day when I attempted to interview Syd Barrett and I couldn't really make contact. I mean, he opened the door to me and he said, "Oh, it's you." But who was I to him? I never really knew. And I spent 24 hours with him, and when I left, I wondered whether he'd actually known who I was, because he never said my name.
Are there any notes surviving from that interview, or was it?
Oh, it was published, the interview.
It was.
Yes, it was published.
So you do remember some of it then?
Well, I wrote it down afterwards.
Yeah.
I didn't write it down at the time, but then I never do.